The coffee cup slipped from my hand the moment she walked through the diner door. 10 years had passed, but I knew her before she even looked up. She was older, quieter, carrying the kind of sadness that time does not erase. Then she saw me behind the counter, froze, and whispered one sentence that made the entire decade between us disappear: "You were the reason I came back." If you believe that kindness can survive years of silence, that forgiveness can heal what pride breaks, and that second chances sometimes arrive when we least expect them, please take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about compassion, courage, and the unexpected ways people change our lives. My name is Caleb, and I owned a small diner outside Nashville, Tennessee, a place called Grace's Table that I had opened with my wife, Rebecca, after years of working jobs that never felt like they belonged to me. The diner was nothing fancy. There were 12 booths, a counter with 6 stools, old photographs of Nashville on the walls, and a bell above the door that rang every time someone entered. But to me, it was more than a business. It was the place where lonely people found company, where tired nurses drank coffee after long shifts, where truck drivers rested before sunrise, and where anyone short on money could still get a warm meal without being embarrassed. I had learned that a meal could sometimes mean much more than food. 10 years earlier, before the diner existed, I had met a young woman named Hannah at a bus station during a storm. She had been sitting alone with a worn suitcase beside her, trying desperately to make a phone call from a dying cell phone. I never learned every detail of what had happened in her life, but I knew she was scared and trying to start over. I bought her dinner at the little cafe across the street and slipped enough money into her coat pocket for a bus ticket and a night at a safe motel. She tried to refuse, but I told her that someday, when she was strong enough, she could do the same for someone else. She thanked me with tears in her eyes, and then she disappeared into the rain. Life moved forward. Rebecca and I married, opened our diner, and eventually learned that we would not have the family we had dreamed about. That disappointment changed us in ways neither of us expected. There were nights when Rebecca cried quietly in the kitchen after closing, and I pretended not to notice because I did not know how to make the pain disappear. Instead of allowing that emptiness to consume us, we began treating the diner like a second home for people who needed one. Our waitress, Martha, became like family, and our cook, Samuel, joked that he had been adopted by the place whether he liked it or not. Then, on an ordinary Thursday morning, the bell above the door rang. Hannah walked in. She was no longer the frightened young woman from the bus station. She wore a simple navy coat and carried a leather bag. Her hair was shorter, her face more mature, but her eyes were unmistakable. She looked around the diner as if searching for something she was afraid she might never find. When her eyes met mine, all the noise around me seemed to fade. She sat at the counter, and for several seconds neither of us knew what to say. Then she placed a small envelope on the counter and told me she had carried it for 10 years. Inside was the motel receipt from that rainy night, carefully folded and preserved. Beneath it was a photograph of a little girl standing beside a woman who looked remarkably like Hannah. I learned that after leaving Nashville, Hannah had rebuilt her life. She had found steady work, returned to school, and eventually became a social worker. She had spent years helping women and families who were trying to escape difficult circumstances. But there was something else she had never forgotten. The kindness I had shown her had become the first proof she had that strangers could still be good. Then she explained why she had really come. The little girl in the photograph was her daughter, Grace. Hannah had named her after the diner I had eventually opened, because she wanted her child to grow up carrying a reminder of the grace that had once been shown to her. I could barely speak. Hannah told me that Grace was now 9 years old and had recently asked why her mother always kept an old motel receipt inside a box of important memories. Hannah had finally told her the truth. Years ago, when she had believed her life was falling apart, one stranger had helped her without asking for anything in return. Grace had asked where that stranger was now. That was why Hannah had come. She did not want money. She did not need a favor. She simply wanted me to meet the child whose name had been inspired by a kindness I had almost forgotten. When Grace entered the diner, holding her mother's hand, she smiled shyly and looked around at the warm booths and photographs. I knelt beside her and told her that her mother had once taught me something important too. I told her that sometimes we do one small good thing and never discover where it leads. Rebecca came from the kitchen and embraced Hannah. There were tears in all our eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were the kind that come when life quietly reveals that something you thought was lost had actually been growing somewhere beyond your sight. Before Hannah left, she handed me another envelope. Inside was a photograph of herself from 10 years earlier, standing outside that motel after the storm. On the back she had written, "You helped me believe tomorrow was worth reaching." That sentence stayed with me long after the door closed. Years ago, I thought I had simply bought a stranger dinner. I never imagined that a few dollars, a warm meal, and a little compassion could travel through 10 years and become a child's name, a woman's purpose, and a reunion neither of us had expected. If this story touched your heart, please support the video with a like, share it with someone who believes small acts of kindness matter, and subscribe if you want more stories that remind us that hope can survive even the longest silence. And before the story ends, I want you to leave one comment. What is one small act of kindness you received that you still remember today? That evening, after the diner closed, I stood beneath the soft yellow lights and looked at the old bell above the door. Rebecca slipped her hand into mine. Neither of us said much. We did not need to. 10 years earlier, I had helped Hannah find a way forward. 10 years later, she came back and reminded me that kindness does not disappear when the moment is over. Sometimes it travels. Sometimes it grows. And sometimes, when you least expect it, it walks back through your door carrying a name, a photograph, and proof that the good you do in this world may continue changing lives long after you have forgotten you ever did it.